Hi guys, Extra Crispy here again with another down and dirty tutorial for some gaming tips. Today I'm going to suggest you take a trip to your friendly neighborhood fabric store. The fabric store is loaded with all kinds of useful items, and today I'm going to just sort of show you a few and encourage you to make a stop and browse around and see what you come up with. Many gamers will use felt. It's easily available at Walmart and Target. It's cheap at 99 cents a square or 50 cents. I'm not a big fan for two reasons. One, it tends to be somewhat thick, 2 millimeters, eighth of an inch, something like that, which means that a lot of your terrain is elevated, especially I do a lot with 6 millimeter. It's sort of weird to have a piece of dirt be half a man high. The other thing is that the color is so uniform that unless you do some work with it to sort of break up, either some paint or some flock or spray paint or whatever, it just doesn't look right to my eye. It looks like what it is. It's just sort of a plop square of felt. So I just wanted to suggest you get to your local friendly neighborhood fabric store and look at some of the alternatives that they have there. And I'll start with a basic piece here. This is a nice tan color, but it's very mottled. It's broken up. There's some lighter and darker patches. So to my eye, it just makes a much nicer looking field or piece of rough terrain or base for a house or whatever you're using than just this kind of uniform felt. Fabrics tend to come in predominantly three widths: 45 inches, 60 inches, and 72 inches. Most of your cotton prints like this are 45 inches wide. So 1 yard at $7 or so gets you almost 12 square feet. That's a lot of fields and terrain. Most fabric stores will sell you half a yard. Some will sell a third. And some, if not all, have remnants sections. Those are definitely worth checking out, where they just have a scrap left over and it's a little less than a yard. They'll often discount those as well. They're typically sold as is and non-returnable, but for terrain pieces, we're not terribly concerned. So in addition to, so this nice tan for a field, you can find a lot of cotton prints that come in a variety of colors and textures. Here's an orange one. This has some purple dots that gives it kind of a, moss, small flowers, whatever. Obviously for more of a science fiction setting, this might be a nice rocky area for, say, Mars, with little, broken terrain. Here's a similar piece in bright green, and you'll notice very often you'll see a pattern like this, and it'll come in 20 different color combinations, and there will be, pink, purple, and so on. A blue version of this might make a good C-mat rather than just kind of blue felt or plastic. So here's a green one. I might use this for jungle. Again, more of a science fiction setting. And again, I'll put things on top of this typically. Trees, flocking, lichen, foliage, twigs, whatever. This might mark the edge of a swamp, and I'll plump down a few, plants or whatever to decorate it. It's cheap, it's fast, it's easy, and it doesn't take any particular skill. Here's a piece of red. I lost it, but a couple of years ago I made a lava river with a piece of cloth very much like this. It was a little more orange than this one. I bought this for my Martian empires. This will be for rough terrain. Again, I'll put down rocks and other stuff, so it won't be quite a big red storm like Jupiter's. But again, sort of serves to delineate the edge of a piece of terrain. But again, I think looks better than just plain felt. One tip: if you're going to use cotton fabric like this, cut it into shapes, give the back side a nice heavy spray with your cheap dollar store hairspray. It will stiffen it up, and then once you cut it and trim off all these little threads, it'll prevent it from fraying. It will also give it a little stiffness, so it'll lie down. Almost all of these have enough grip, by the way, so that if you place them on hills or ridges or on top of your gaming mat, they won't slide around. not really an issue. It is with plastics, but not so much with fabric. Other patterns you can find, here's kind of a crosshatch pattern. I used this actually, I glued this to some walls of some native huts that I made. Again, more of a science fiction setting. These were lizard men. Again, imagining kind of a Gilligan's Island type construction. I made the shells out of just cardstock and then glued this over. Super fast, super easy, and made a really nice looking piece. This could also be used obviously for a field, again for rough terrain, crops, or a garden. Lots of uses for that. Speaking of fields, if you ask for teddy bear fur, or you go look at the faux fur section, you can find things like this. This one is nice. It's sort of long, pale crops. I don't know, wheat or rye or barley, whatever that might be. I'll typically glue this to something else, even just a piece of paper, and then put clumped foliage around the edge. By itself, it makes a really nice field. This particular one sheds like crazy, so the hairspray is really necessary on this one. These edges just, when I cut it, I now cut it outside because I get so many threads coming off the edge. But after I've cut the shape and I give it a heavy dose of hairspray, I just sort of pick off the excess, and then it's good to go. Here's another faux fur with a much shorter nap. Again, it's just got some texture. That would be a good wheat field. Maybe a nice crop for a smaller scale game with 6mm or 10mm. Could also be used as a roof on, say, as a thatched roof. Glue that over the top of your building and then just paint and dry brush, and you get this really nice texture. This might work similarly for a 28mm house. Nice thatched roof. Hit it up with a little white glue or maybe just hairspray. Either way. Another useful thing I found, corduroy. This is dark brown, but this has extra wide ridges, and I've made a couple of fields out of these. Done it a couple of different ways. The first, I glued flock on top of the ridges. That worked pretty well. It was a little tedious, but it did work. And then for plowed fields with no crops, I gave this a very heavy dry brush of medium brown, followed by a light dry brush of bone or pale white. And that made a really nice field. And again, I'll typically glue this onto either a piece of card, scrapped plastic packaging, whatever I have handy, and then put clump foliage around the edge, maybe a fence or a gate, whatever. So again, lots of really useful fabrics. And then finally, check out your felt aisle. You can buy felt like this, but you can also buy felt like this that has a pattern. So if you're going to do a square of green for your forest, pick something like this. Again, a yard of this, this was a little more expensive. I think it was $10 or $11 a yard. But you buy a half a yard, $5 or $6, and you get enough material for loads of forest squares. One technique I've seen that a gentleman in our club uses, he bought a piece of fabric like this. He cut some kidney-shaped pieces, sort of irregular, roundish pieces. And each kidney-shaped piece could be on its own a small forest, in a game where you're doing all of Waterloo or Gettysburg. But when he wanted to put them together, he could just kind of overlap them into the shape of the woods that he wanted, and then he would top them off with trees and twigs and little bits of decor to make his forest. Again, the fabric acts as a nice way to define where the edge of the forest is, so you can move the trees about without wondering whether a particular set of troops is in the forest, out of the forest, or on the edge. But again, much better looking in my opinion than just sort of plain old green. And also this being an olive color, just a much more natural color. I see these bright green or Kelly green squares used for forests with two lonely trees on them, and I just think, if you had just another dollar and a little thought, and you'd have had a much more appealing visual experience, and something that doesn't take a ton of money, doesn't take any skill whatsoever, just takes a little forethought and a little willingness to hop down the street to your local fabric shop. Wander the stacks, take a look, you'd be surprised what you might find.